In the second session, we were talking about not just the role and its dignity and its importance. We started talking about execution. And we said, if you're having problems, and you know when you're having problems executing, you can get discouraged. Have you ever felt discouraged? When you feel discouraged, you know what that means? It just means that something needs to change. It's just a sign. If you feel fatigued, if you feel exhausted, if you feel discouraged, it may mean that you need to quit staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning playing your Connect. It may mean that you need to quit hanging out with malcontents who are always fussing about something. You need some better friends. It may mean that you're mismatched with your job and that you would like to serve in a different area. Maybe you've got a job that's too big for any human being, and perhaps it needs to be divided. Instead of building and grounds, how about grounds, or vice versa? It may be you need to grow spiritually. It may be that you need to adjust your attitude. There's lots of possibilities, and most of the time, the answer is not quitting.
That's right.
Be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Have you heard that passage before? You know what Paul was saying? Let me paraphrase for you, okay? You like modern translations? What he was saying is, don't quit and don't coast. Don't resign. Don't relax. Folks, the work is too important. And we need to continue with dedication. And if you bail, what happens if you bail? You get a little relief for a while, but you don't grow. All the things you're proud of in your life challenged you and you stuck with it. Isn't that right? Everything that you're proud of in your life. And the same thing here. So don't let bailing be your option. Just look, get a good night's sleep. Say a prayer. Jesus said, men ought always to pray and not to what? Faint. If I'm feeling faint, guess what I'm probably not doing enough of? So you see, there's something that needs to change. I'm not praying enough. Now, in this session, we're going to look at your relationships. And I think many times this is the area you need to most look at if you're feeling discouraged. You're trying to do it all by yourself. You try to do it all by yourself, you know how you're going to feel? Rotten. Now, we're not going to talk just about your team in the sense of the people who help you with your vacation Bible school or your building committee or visitation. That's not exactly what we're going to be talking about. You work with all kinds of people. Deacons are people-centric. Would you agree with that? Yes. It's not just a task. You work with people. You work with those who are on your committee or in your ministry. You inspire young people. You support elders. You love and care for your family. But as you go about that job, it's not just the people you serve, it's the people that you lean on for your ministry. I want to talk about those relationships. The ones that you need to lean on for strength and for help. And if you'll leverage these relationships, it's going to bless you. I call it your circle of success. Some people are trying to lead, but they have a disconnect from God. Some people are trying to lead, but they're not in a healthy relationship with their elders. Some people are trying to do it and they never call on their peers, their colleagues, their fellow deacons. I think that's a waste. They're a resource God placed at your disposal. And one of the most important, in fact, the most important right behind your relationship with the Lord is with your spouse. Because the healthier that relationship is, the more you are going to be effective. So, being a deacon is not just about hard work. It's about working well with people. In fact, if you accomplish your task, in some cases somebody thinks they've done what they were asked to do, but they can leave chaos in their wake. No, is the church more unified? Are people blessed? Are they closer? We've got to work well with people. But now let's talk about the people who help us and support us. Number one, your relationship with God. Isn't that first? And I'll just say as a preacher, I know that it's possible to try occasionally to lead without God, because I've tried it. and it doesn't work. I think it happens to elders. I think it happens to deacons. And sometimes we've got to stop and get our bearings, because when you try to lead without God, one of two things is going to happen. One is that you can grow worldly, and the other is you can grow weary. If you're trying to lead using only your wisdom, you'll grow worldly. I mean, you can get... A couple of things can happen. One is you can become oppressive, you can get bossy, or you can grow permissive. And I think as God's leaders, we want to be men of character and kind. Can you do both of those? And I think when we lead with God's wisdom, that's what we do. That we hold people accountable because we care for them. But there's a gentleness that's involved. There's a firmness and a gentleness. There's a balance in those two things. The other thing is that we can try to lead with our own power. Jesus said, unless you abide in me, you can't bear fruit. I lose my power. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. I can't bear fruit for Christ. I can't serve God at my best unless I'm close to the Lord. So, the point is, the quality of your relationship with God determines the quality of your ministry results. So your first responsibility each and every day is to be in the Word, to be in prayer, and to meditate. If you're not doing those things, you may say, I don't have time. You're wrong. You cannot accomplish near as much on your power as you can with God as that central stabilizing force that's going to support all the activity of the day. As we think about this picture, do you see this? What's he drinking here? Some kind of energy drink, Gatorade, Powerade. If you're a runner, I'm a runner. I'm sure you could tell looking at me. I run marathons. That's my hobby. They're very slow marathons. I do run all the way, but when I started this, I was 48, and I said I need a hobby, and so that's one thing I've enjoyed doing. When you increase your mileage, what else do you need to increase as you're doing that? If I'm going to have stamina, I've got to look at my nutrition. I've got to look at my hydration. If you're a lifter, if you're an athlete, if you're increasing reps, you're increasing weight, you're increasing miles, you can't eat the same thing. You have to have the proteins and the carbohydrates for building muscle and for endurance, and you need the water. What happens if your body loses just 1 to 2% of its water content? What happens? You start to have different problems. And of course, as your body becomes dehydrated, you can have heat stroke, but most of the time you may get cramps or you just get more fatigued. Those are the kinds of things that happen. You lose coordination and concentration. It impairs your brain, and you just run low on power. And just a little bit of that loss of your water content can reduce your efficiency by as much as 10%. Now, do you see the parallel I'm making here? We're going from serving here as a member of the church to accepting the call to be a deacon. So we're stepping things up. We're going to be doing more than we were doing in the past. Do you think we need to step up our prayer life? We need to spend a little more time in the Word. And I would suggest just when you get out of bed in the morning, just kind of roll out and just get on your knees. And you'll have more extended times of prayer throughout the day, but just start the day right. Start it right. And ask God to use you. Ask Him to help you bless somebody's life, to encourage somebody, to help you go about and do good, as we studied in our first lesson. I think if you do that, you're going to be on the right track, and you'll pray more as the day goes on, but your mind will be in the right place. It all starts with your relationship with God. First and most important. Now, secondly, we're going to go to elders. Not because this is the most important, but because I want to be sure that we include this. We'll close out with the most important thing right behind your relationship with God. But this is crucial. Hebrews 13:17. Obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give an account. Is this passage just for deacons?
No.
It's for all the members of the congregation. But if you as a deacon have come on the leadership team with the purpose of carrying out the instructions of your elders and supporting them, do you think that applies to you in a special way? That I need to be able to work with them, cooperate with them, submit to them. Now, look at the second part of this. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. Why would it be unprofitable for you? For your elders to see you coming and go, shake their head, frown. Why would that be unprofitable for you? Now just think about this. What's the purpose of an elder? What's he wanting to do for people? Wants to save their souls? Wants to shepherd them? Help them grow? Become more Christ-like? If there's a frown on their face, what does that tell you about how you're doing? Their concern is your well-being. If there's a smile on your elder's face, what does that say about your well-being? And if there's sadness on his face, it's unprofitable for you. Because as you cause him grief, what you're seeing in his face is a reflection of the face of God. That his hurt, his pain, I think mirrors God's pain. Because all that shepherd wants is to see you thriving spiritually, flourishing, enjoying abundant life, growing. Now, let's talk about this. He says, you want to help them do their job with joy. We said this is a passage that belongs to every member of the church. Don't you wish every member of the church thought like that? But if they're not thinking like that, don't you think God's leadership team needs to be thinking like that? How can I bring my elders joy? I have the power to do that. I must. The Hebrews writer says it's possible. Well, what can I do for that to be true? I've got a few suggestions for you. The first one is simply to lead yourself well. Because the more time that your elder has to spend managing you and directing you and motivating you and correcting you, the less time he spends on his other responsibilities. Now, he wants to encourage and direct and train, but you see what I'm saying? If there are problems, if there are constant problems surrounding you, what kind of problems are we talking about? Irresponsibility. You get a job, but you don't do it. And that brings him grief. When you do what you say that you'll do, it brings him joy. So irresponsibility is part of it. But it's not just irresponsibility. It is intemperance. You want to bring grief to your elders? You be in a fuss with people all the time. Rather than promoting peace and unity in the church, whenever you do a job, you do it, but everybody gets upset. There's lots of drama. You ruffle lots of feathers because you just can't control your mouth or you can't control your anger. The other one is if you're immoral. If there's some issue and it brings reproach on the congregation and they've got to come in and deal with it, they still love you. They want to support you and help you, but our job is to be a role model of righteousness and responsibility. So it brings them grief because they're concerned about your welfare. Now just look at the opposite. If you are responsible and if you are peaceable and you are honorable, can you see the joy that brings to your eldership? I think this is where it all begins. You lead yourself well. I would also say go the second mile. There's some people who don't want to do things unless it just suits them. And I think you ought to try to be matched with your passion. Let me say that. But sometimes there are things to be done that nobody likes to do. And maybe you'll need to take your turn for a little while, or it may just be a brief assignment. I think elders need somebody who they can go to when it's not glamorous and it's not fun, but it needs to be done for the welfare of the church. And where you say, how can I help? And they tell you, and you drop everything and you go and you get it done. You go the second mile. I think that would be part of it. And every congregation has a few men like that. Every eldership has just a few men like that who become very trusted, who they lean on very heavily. One thing I would say is build the relationship. I think the quality of your relationship with your elders, again, is going to affect the quality of your leadership. And you may say, well, I'm here. He can come and see me anytime he wants. But I hope that you'll take the initiative. You've got to remember, you know how many deacons your elders are overseeing, how many ministry leaders your elders are overseeing, how many concerns they have. If you're reporting to one elder, it's a lot easier for you to do this. I would encourage you to do this. It's your job to support him. Because if you know him not just as an authority figure, but as a human being, doesn't that make a difference? Help me out. Tell me what you could do with your elder to just spend some time together, to invest in the relationship, to build some chemistry so that you understand each other better, you work together better. Well, tell me some things you could do.
Play golf.
You could play golf. You could play golf. I would rather die than play golf. But I would do it for my elders. I'm just terrible. I get embarrassed because I'm so bad. But I do it. I do it on rare occasions, and I do it for that purpose. It's not about golf. It's about a relationship. What else could you do? You could say, next time you're going to visit, can I go along? It could be to the hospital or maybe to one of the shut-ins. I've been wanting to see Sister Susie. Next time you're going to see her, could I go? I think they'll tell you yes. And you'll get to talk. I've had some of the best times of my life going to a funeral. For those of you who have been oftentimes on those trips and you remember the life of the person that you're going to see, and as you have those memories and all the discussions, a little laughter, there's some inspiration, but you grow close on those trips. What else could you do?
You tell them how much you appreciate what they're trying to do.
Well, you could tell them how much you appreciate them. You understand the load that they're shouldering. And you appreciate that for your family. You appreciate that for your children. And you could do that. In fact, you could invite them over to your house and you could feed them a meal. Sometimes I encourage people to write a thank you letter and express the things, that you always mean to say but you haven't said. And you could mail it, or you could just have them come over to your house, have your son or your daughter read the letter to them, and then give it to them. what could you do?
Pray for them.
You can pray for them and let them know,
Let them know it.
I'm praying for you. I like to tell people, but we need to mean what we say. Well, there's lots of opportunities. I've been shooting skeet with my elders before. You know, some elders run. You can run with them. You can walk with them. You can tailgate with them. Go to a ball game. You can go to a singing, a gospel meeting, affirming the faith. You name it. But build the relationship. The last thing I wanted to say here is, if you're always getting better, I think it pleases your elders. In John 15, it tells us that if we're bearing fruit, what does the Lord do? He prunes us so that we will bear more fruit. Get rid of the dead wood and become more fruitful. We always ought to be trying to improve. Work is hard on yourself as you do on your ministry. So I'm wanting to grow in knowledge. I'm wanting to improve my prayer life. I'm trying to improve my skill sets, and that may be in presentations. That may be doing some speaking once in a while. I'm reading leadership books. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to happen all at once. It's just I'm trying each day to get just a little bit better. Now, if you turn that on its head, you can see how you can bring your elders grief, can't you? You be disorderly, and you be uncooperative, and you be distant and withdrawn, and be self-satisfied, and I think that will bring sadness to your elders. In churches, I think every congregation needs some standard operating procedures. I think it's good to put it on paper. And we have what we call vision and values ceremonies, where we talk about what we believe, our doctrinal commitments, and our vision for the congregation. But we also talk about values, not just biblical values of faith and hope and love. That's part of it. But we also talk about operational values. How do we get things done here in this culture? And let me tell you what some of those are. I bet you've got similar ones. One is that when you have a problem and you're going to bring it to your elders, what should you bring along with the problem?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. I have an exceptionally bright audience today. That just makes sense, doesn't it? And really, how about 2 or 3? When you come, you bring a plan A, a plan B. Who should be a part of that plan, by the way? All of the above, but the one I was thinking of, you ought to be a part of that. Don't you have people in your congregation who say, somebody ought to do something? And they're always spotting problems. There are people who think they lead and all they do is spot problems. Well, everybody knows that's a problem, but
they're never there.
Yeah. They're not going to contribute to it. They're not going to put their shoulder to the wheel. They're not going to do their part. And so we need, when we bring a problem to the elders, to bring solutions. Plan A, Plan B, and here's what I'll do. I'll lead it. I'll be a part of the team. I'll give toward it. Boy, that would bring some joy to your elders. Number 2, when you have a request. Sometimes it's not a problem, but you have a request, and you're coming in and asking your elders for something. When you come in and ask for it, how about if we bring them enough information to make a decision? I see people come into elders' meetings and they have some good ideas and they want to do something, but they haven't really thought about it. And the truth is, they're wasting their elders' time. When I say wasting their time, the elders are excited for them, but they're coming in there and they haven't gotten bids. There's no financial plan. It's almost like, I'm going to change the world. Would you give me a blank check? I just want carte blanche. Just give it here. Just trust me and let me go on my way. It work? Is that how they treat you? Or do they expect you to have bids? Competitive bids. How many bids does your workplace require of you? 3? All right. Several people said 3. We could come into that meeting with a simple financial plan. Doesn't have to be elaborate. We could have a few bids. And if your decision involves other people in the church, I mean, how many times have you had this kind of experience? You were teaching in a class, you come in, it's Sunday, and your class has been moved, and somebody else has it, or you thought you had some resource, and that resource has been reallocated, and you were not consulted, and you're a very congenial and cooperative person, but people aren't always that way. If my decision affects somebody else in the church, I either need to consult them or assemble them. I can get them in the room and say, you're a part of the education team. We're talking about classroom space. We want you to be a part of this process. Or I could just go talk to them and say, I'm thinking about making this change. Do you think that helps your elders when you have gone the second mile and you have gotten the people information, the financial information, whatever is necessary? Be prepared every time you take your elders' time. When you come in there, you're clear about what's going on, your plan, and what's involved, and you give them enough information so that they could make a decision and send you on your way. Assignments, let me just be quick. If you say you'll do it, do it. Now, is there any help we can give? Yes, don't say yes so much. Now, I know you want to be ready unto every good work. You have human limitations, and your heart is willing, but the flesh is weak. So don't overcommit, because if you overcommit, who are you going to end up stealing that time from?
Yourself.
It's going to come from your family. It's going to come from somewhere. And that means really you're not going to give the elders this kind of service that you want to give. So if it's a big commitment, I'm not talking about a little thing, but if it's a big commitment, sleep on it and pray about it and consult your spouse before you say yes. Then when you make a commitment, it's a real commitment because you have considered the costs. And a lot of times our hearts are just, we just want to say yes. We want to please people. We commit to things. And then we realize that our capacity is not up to what we have promised to do. So, they say that credibility is the ratio between promises made and promises kept. That's your credibility. Promises made, promises kept. So don't say yes too quick or too easily, but when you say yes, you do it. You get her done. Let me see. I think here I was just talking about, we discussed earlier, under promise, over deliver. Leave yourself breathing room. Do you realize how much stress we create for ourselves in life? And we think it's all being put on us. But I think a great deal of that stress is self-created. And we need to look. Let me give you an example. Coming out here, oftentimes I like to come in the day before. It just changes the whole experience for me. I went down to East Side and Duncan and visited with Ron Stow and some old friends, and then I was able to get up here and get in the hotel and relax, study my lessons. Now I can come into workshops at the very last minute, but you know what? The whole time I'm wondering, am I going to make my connection? Is that plane going to run late? I have a totally different experience, and if I'm exhausted emotionally, is it going to show up in my workshops? Or I can just leave myself some breathing room, and I can still use that time very well. I can read, I can write, I can pray, I can do many things, but by arranging the schedule different, I have a wonderful weekend. Disagreements. Is it disrespectful to disagree with your elders? No. I mean, do elders want a bunch of yes men who come in? Yes, that's brilliant. Well, occasionally, but not all the time. You get the best outcomes when you can have a real discussion about options. And you need to have a healthy environment there. You know what happens in most elders and deacons meetings, in my experience, over my very short time in ministry, is you get into a meeting and a lot of times whoever makes a proposal sets the bar and nobody wants to say anything because they're afraid that whoever mentioned the first idea is going to take this personally. They're going to internalize it. They're going to take it as a criticism, and I just don't want to go there. It's just not going to be worth it. Is that sad? What happens in the Lord's church when we can't say, well, that's a great idea. Let's look at other possibilities. And we invite discussion. And it's okay to disagree. Well, I think this would be a better expenditure. And it's not about me. It's just about exchanging ideas. Well, if you have disagreement, when should you express that disagreement? Just go ahead and express it in a timely way. And if you don't, it builds up. Or I'll tell you what happens. We sit there in a meeting, and everybody smiles, and everybody on board, and we say, yes. And then we walk out of the room, and we say, you're not going to believe what they did this time.
And then they do it anyway.
What's your opinion of a person who would do that? I think it's cowardly. I think it's divisive. I think it's sinful. You know, what we're talking about here is man up. That we have to become able. Would you agree with me that it is a sign of spiritual health when men can come together and they can share ideas and they can disagree and everybody not fall apart and have a fuss and a fight?
Shows true Christian maturity.
So you need to do it at the right place. You need to do it at the right time. I believe that your elders will appreciate your candidness. Now the key is how you do it. Would you agree with that? You need to do it ethically and you need to do it respectfully. Elders are God's anointed in the church. I mean, this is God's plan. The congregation has followed it. They're in these positions because they have followed the teaching of Scripture. And there needs to be an appropriate respect. Doesn't mean you're disloyal if you disagree. Doesn't mean you're disrespectful. But you do it with the right attitude. And you do it ethically, at the right place, at the right time. I think most elders, not all, but most elders, and spiritually healthy elders, are going to appreciate your candor. If the bridge is out, I kind of like to know about it. I'd like a heads up. Now, having said that, there is a time to nudge your elders. I use the word nudge. We could say push. Nudge is a better word. Is there a time to nudge your elders? You're getting some feedback from the congregation. Maybe they're not hearing it. Or you see that there's a potential problem with some new ministry that's going to be launched. Now, in other words, when I say push, this is what I mean. You've gone to them, you shared your concern, and they're proceeding, and you go back to them a second time and say, you know, I love you. I just want to express some things that are on my heart. I'm not sure. Or let's just use this illustration. When your wife didn't hear you the first time, did you ever go back to her? And maybe you just get a little bit closer and say, now, sweetie pie, look here. I want to talk to you. And so you express it again. Your intensity is not trying to intimidate her, but you're trying to say, I just want to be sure that you understand the emotion that I'm feeling here, the concern that I have here. There is a place to nudge. If you think it's important, and we're talking mostly about matters of judgment here and how to proceed in some, there's a time to push, to nudge. There's a time to pull back. Would you agree with me there? When do you pull back? When's the right time to pull back? They'll let you know. They'll let you know. And that's right. Sometimes they'll tell you. Can you say thank you? Thank you for hearing me. I feel like I needed to get that off my chest, and I appreciate you giving me the time. And you reassure them that you're a part of the team. And you're not going to drag your feet. And you're not going to oppose it. And you're not going out to spread dissent. You're sharing information at the right place at the right time. When you have said what you need to say, and you know that they have heard you, it's time to pull back. Even if you don't think it's the best thing that they're doing, you still need to pull back. And you need to get on board. And you need to support it because the congregation moves forward as a team. Even when you're right and you know you're right, there comes a time to pull back. You know what? If things don't go well, you'll have another opportunity. And you don't have to rub it in. And you can try a new option in a new direction. So know when to push, know when to push back. The last thing I wanted to say is, as part of the leadership team, there are going to be times that you get in conflict with somebody. I think it helps your elders if, when that occurs, you always believe the best about people. That you assume positive intent. That you don't imagine all of their motives or impute motives to them. And I think about 1 Corinthians 13:7, where it tells us, what time is this class going to end, by the way? 3:30. Okay, where it tells us to believe all things, bear all things, hope all things, endure all things. That needs to be our default attitude towards people. And so we don't come to the elder saying, you won't believe what he said. And we bring slanted information, emotive language and affected tones, and then they get this impression and run with it, and really we just set them up because they acted on our prejudices. Well, the thing that I most wanted to talk about, I've got to go too quickly, and that's marriage. And I apologize for not getting here sooner. Can you have how many of you want an average marriage? Okay, that's your goal in life. I want a mediocre marriage. Can we have a goal as deacons in the Lord's church to multiply our effectiveness? We want to, in our ministries, we are going to work on our marriages. Because everything I learn is transferable. When I negotiate bedtimes and budgets, am I learning leadership skills? I'm learning about patience. I'm learning about compassion. I'm learning about conflict resolution. I'm learning about problem solving. I'm learning about communication skills. I am learning so much. And your marriage is a center for research and development. It is not a battleground. It's a training ground. And when you look at it, there's just so many wonderful opportunities. I think it all begins with you saying, I want an incredible marriage. Because as you do that, most of your work is going to be not spouse improvement, but self-improvement. That's how you improve your marriage. Well, Lord, if you'll just change this woman. We tell the counselor, we tell the preacher, we tell the Lord, when the whole time, if we could learn to be more considerate, more servant-hearted, communicate better, be more compassionate, we can change everything. You see, when you have an incredible marriage, you are developing the kind of heart, the sensitivity of heart that allows you to care for the downtrodden of the church. And you get a base of support, don't you? Because she feels more appreciative and closer to you, and you work better as a team. So I think you can make this a go. By the way, the word incredible, the primary definition is preposterous and absurd. And do you think some people believe that about marriage? This was just a cruel hoax. Somebody was playing a trick on us. It's not really possible. And because they think that, they don't invest themselves in their marriage. They think if you do have a good marriage, it's just for those who won the wife lottery. A few guys won the wife lottery. Well, the other definition is marvelous, wonderful, amazing, Imagine what will happen in your life and in your ministry when your marriage goes to another level. Because when you have problems, you're tired before the day starts. You couldn't even sleep last night. Can you tell when somebody has trouble at work? Trouble at home, and they're bringing it to work. They're disengaged, they're preoccupied. You know what I'm talking about. It's the same thing happens in the church. But I think these things help us. You need to pray for your spouse. Any of you see Forrest Gump? Can I say that here? This is the TV version, by the way, okay? If you saw Forrest Gump, do you remember that scene near the end of the movie where Jenny, his childhood sweetheart, is now his bride, and she's sick and she's close to death, and he's bringing her breakfast in bed? Does anybody remember that scene? And she asks him, she's kind of looking out the window, and she is asking him about his time in Vietnam. And she asked him, "Were you ever scared?" And he says, "Yeah." But then he says, "I don't know." And he starts thinking about experiences he had. Like one day when it quit raining. And when it quit raining, he saw the stars in the sky. And he said it reminded him of the sun on the marshland down in the bayou. And he felt like he was home. A lot of miles from there, but in his heart, he was home. And one day he said, I was running beside this mountain lake, and it looked like there were two skies on top of each other. And he's running through the desert, and he said, you can't tell where the heavens end and the earth begins. And Jenny's hearing all this stuff, and she says to him, "Forrest, I wish I was there." And he gets the most puzzled look on his face. His face just wrinkles up. And he looks at her and he says, "You were." You see, I think that's how it needs to be with you and your spouse. Now, in our technological age, when you're apart, you can text her, send her. When I go to the grocery store, I take pictures just to prove her to my wife that I'm where I'm supposed to be and what I'm picking up, and I send those in. But you can do things like that. Here's what I want to tell you. If your Wi-Fi is down and your battery's dead, there's never a time when you're closer to your spouse than when you carry her to God's throne. And you thank God for giving you somebody to love. And you ask God's blessings upon her. And while you're there, why not ask God to help you become the man that she needs and deserves? We can pray more for our marriage. I post things at my house. Maybe you've got them on your computer, but pictures and little memorabilia. I have a stitching that says, when I get up in the morning, I'm headed to the bathroom. It's right there to the left of the door. Honey, I can't promise you I'll be here for the rest of your life, but I do promise you I'll love you for the rest of mine. As long as there's breath in my body. You can plan to spend time together. It could be exercising together in the morning. It could be an ocean cruise. It could be just all the joy of saving and planning together and thinking of basking in each other's undivided attention. The most important thing you can do is to really listen to her. Doesn't cost a dime, but listen to her in a way that says, "You're important to me, and I want to understand you." And when you're not interrupting and changing the subject, but you're immersed in her words, something is happening that's wonderful. You need to focus on her as the most important person in your life. You need to be flexible. Every day I ask Lisa a question. What can I do to bring joy to you every morning? To make you blissfully, ecstatically happy. What can I do? And most of the time it's something very small, but I get the credit. I was going to have to do it anyway, but I get the credit for having asked. And I had a guy in the back of the room one time. He started texting his wife, "What can I do to make you ecstatically, joyfully, blissfully happy?" And she texted back, "Honest, I'm not mad." You see, if you save those questions for rare occasions, She may question your motives. But if that becomes a part of every day, what would you like me to do less of? What could I do more of? What am I missing? Well, work on your marriage, and God will bless your ministry through your spiritual growth.